Did you hear me bouncing around? That was me trying to get my cushion adjusted. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am, without my glasses again, I am the teacher, and this is the classroom. Let's see. I know I'm going to need my glasses. I always need them eventually, and I don't want to have to worry about them. So I'm going to I've got a video for you that I want to show you. We are starting a new topic today. That is so exciting to me. And our topic that we're talking about today is, even though it's in tiny, tiny print over there, we are talking about group think. And this has been, talked about and mentioned, in various places now. It's kind of would be a hot thought and a hot topic, right? Because we're using the word sheeple. So, hey, here is a real scientific perspective on making sheeple, if you want to know. So we're going to start with a little video here. If I had my glasses, I could identify it faster. And then I'm going to go get my glasses. But it's going to take, there we go. I got it. Ooh. Now I lost it. Seriously. There it is. Okay, here it comes.
The Ash experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you think
the actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1. Two.
1. Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3. 3.
3.
The Ash experiment has been repeated many times, and the results have been supported again and again. We will conform to the group. Again, we're very social creatures. We're very much aware of what the people around us think. We want to be liked. We don't want to be seen to rock the boat, so we will go along with the group. Even if we don't believe what people are saying, we'll still go along.
1. 1. 1.
Group dynamics is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology.
1. 1.
Okay, what do you think about that if you've never seen that before? That was done, Ash was doing experiments in the 1930s, so I think that was 1932. I could be very wrong about that. I'm quite sure I'm wrong about that. But it's bothering me now and I want to look it up. So I am going to look it up. But so it has been doing these studies for a very long time. And this is an outcome of research after World War II. So there's all kinds of research. He did it in 1951. So I figured I was off by quite a bit. That 32 comes in there someplace, but I'm not sure. It could be like general theories on the stuff. Was then, I'm not sure. Don't even worry about that. 1951 was when he did that famous, so holy smokes, that is 80 years ago. I can't even believe it because it was so fresh and new. Not that I was even close, right? But it's very interesting when you take a look at how we get information and the timeline for information. And this is a really good example of it. So I'm not going to tell you when I went to started going to school, because I'm going to go like down a rabbit hole over there. But let's take a look at the studies that we have done on culture. All right. We started doing studies in psychology in the 1930s, right? So that may seem like a long time ago to some, but it really isn't a very long time when you think about the progress that had to be made and how far, what we've done in that time. Because we weren't even doing experimental design when we were talking about the very first theory. So they were just theory. So Freudian theory was just a theory. And that's the reason why in many ways it fell out of favor. Nobody bothered to study it experimentally. And even very few groups have studied it experimentally even since then for all kinds of reasons. But we actually do. Those who have actually done studies, like, for example, on defense mechanisms, all kinds of studies in that area, and definitely a plethora of research on defense mechanisms. So this is a Freudian theory that really has to do with, what were some of those experiences that we had that made us become defensive, right? And so we have not really challenged. So when you're talking about 1951, we really are, now is the very beginnings of challenging theory with experimental design. And this was a real extraordinary experiment. And then what comes into play, and I'm bringing up Milgram's study here in this on the PowerPoints as well, ethical designs of these studies, because now these are the very first time, some of the very first experiments in social psychology. So we are using individuals and we're manipulating individuals, right? You saw how that gentleman was manipulated. He was the only participant in that study. And the rest of the people were what we call Confederates. I've said this before in other classes. If not here, it's a word you'll get used to, all right? So helpers in the experiment. Everyone else knew to some extent, whatever they were supposed to know, more than the participant, and the participant was the one that was being studied. The others were helpers. They were not being studied. The participant was the one that was being studied, right? And in fact, I have some of those stats, if I'm not mistaken. Because we're really getting, and in fact, I'm going to change this title from groupthink to the making of sheeple is what I'm going to call it. So here, the title that I left here, these are from some of my classes that I pulled these slides off of. So sometimes you're getting college level information, and I did learn about this study in college. So what an extraordinary study, right? But again, you can begin to see how people are manipulated, and then we've got ethical concerns. So you can see how there is this natural progression into doing something that is worthwhile, right? We want to study how all these individuals followed Adolf Hitler, right? And followed this Nazi thinking into exterminating 6 million Jews. And now we've got the same kind of thinking in the alt-right. And the irony is they call everybody else sheeples. This whole study could be done on the alt-right because they are the epitome, scientifically speaking, of groupthink. And so I have other videos on this, and you can see some of the other videos on it. It just can't, whatever I'm teaching can't help to overlap into the real world, right? It just can't help. That's why we study right here. Why did Ash and why did Milgram and why did guy I don't like, because to me he was like the epitome of no ethics, Zimbardo, okay? Philip Zimbardo, who did the Stanford prison experiment. Look at how unethical that was. And by that time, he knew. He chose not to know. Watch my spiritual classroom over there about about when we flip into consciousness. I'm going to remember to talk about that in my spiritual classroom, Philip Zimbardo, because he knew by that time. So what I'm saying here, that there is a time where you really can claim innocence in this evolution, in the evolution of this, institution, psychology, right? You really can claim ignorance as far as, I didn't know that this might be hurting people. But then there comes a time where you just simply can't, right? You simply can't. That there were rules put in place, and these rules were put in place in particular because it was very apparent that people were knowledgeable about their unethical behavior, which had everything to do with the rise in modern eugenics. You either believed that people were animals and you could treat them like animals, or you believed that people came from something higher and you felt that you had a moral obligation to do something different, right? Philip Zimbardo clearly did not feel he had a moral obligation to do anything different and treated human beings like animals, is what he did in that study. He truly did. And people will say it's in the name of science. You don't get to treat people like animals in the name of science, and you also don't get to ignore your treatment of those people like that. So the point here is that there is this natural unfolding where we begin to question whether or not what we're doing is moral. And it's the only way we can become not sheeples. All right? Grammatically horrible. It's the only, what? Sheepleless? I don't know. Unsheepled. There we go. Uh-oh. I just have another term that I just made up. That we can become unsheepled. Oh my gosh. Somebody write that down. Quotes. Feravich quotes. The only way that we can become unsheepled is through moral choice. Why? And this is really new to me too. We can become unsheepled through moral choice. Really, a lot of what I'm saying really is Holy Spirit driven. It really is. Because I haven't ever said that before. I haven't ever said they'll put those words together. We become unsheepled through moral choices. Yeah, I don't think so. Not right beforehand. No. I was getting those slides put together is what I was doing for you guys. But it has to be that way because we are judged on our moral behavior. We're judged on our moral behavior, right? And our moral behavior is judged on our intention. So the only way that we can be, judged is on our intention for our moral behavior. And you can see it at my spiritual connection classroom if you want a little bit more of a background on that. And so, and the reason why, because there's consciousness in it, okay? That's where the consciousness occurs. When I make a moral choice, and there's gray, all these gray areas often in moral choices, right? Look at Kohlberg's moral dilemmas, and you can see we purposefully are drawing out all the gray areas of making moral choices. So do you see all the conscious effort that has to take place when we make a moral choice, right? All the conscious effort. That is what we're being judged on right there. Did you do that to the best of your ability? Did you make a moral choice by engaging your awareness, by engaging the facts of the situation, and by engaging your past knowledge? Did you do that? And that is what creates a moral choice. And that is our obligation as human beings in creating this likeness of our Creator. And I know all you alt-right people can understand that. I know you can, right? You don't behave that way, but I know you can you understand what I'm saying. You do. And that's a conviction of your group because you're not doing that. You are not making an intentional choice to move to consciousness, to move to a moral higher thought, higher consciousness, right? Because it all sounds like left stuff to you. That's why you don't do it. That's why you don't do it. That's why you don't engage in higher order thinking, metacognition. You are right down there on those lower levels, is where you are if you are thinking with hate, and that is alt-right. It just is alt-right. It just defines you. And by the way, it's been defining you since the 1980s. So it's not something I'm making up here. That is not something I'm making up here. That has been defining you scientifically since the 1980s, and nothing's changed. And so here we clearly see then, if nothing's changed, the very making of sheeple. What are they making? What are they making from you? Soldiers. Did you not see the soldiers? Did you not see the soldiers they made hanging all over our Congress, our Capitol building, where Congress was? Did you not see that? Did you not see all the sheeple, the soldiers, the sheeple hanging all over? I did. The irony in that, right? The irony in you guys screaming all over our Capitol building, don't be a sheeple. Since the 1980s, they've been making soldiers of you. And what else are you doing? Injecting yourself with a bunch of testosterone? Growth hormones? Soldiers, soldiers, soldiers. You call yourself soldiers. You call yourself patriots. The irony is, you're sheeple. This is what we're going to be talking about in our philosophical class on group think, that we are now changing the title to The Making of Sheeple. Ooh, how about that? How many alt-right people might I get to accidentally click here? Almost as if I am like infiltrating the enemy lines. Woo! All right. You know what happened if I disappear. I gave you guys all kinds of clues. Somebody's not moving to a higher order consciousness, and it might be our judicial system. Might be our patriots. Not the kind of patriots that I was talking about. In our Bookless classroom today, it was awesome. Oh my gosh. You want to hear real American history, the way it's supposed to be told and not hidden? Oh, it's so beautiful and rich. Did I tell you? If you didn't hear, I want to tell you what Lafayette said about George Washington. Well, I'm not going to tell you because that's not our topic. Go look it up. But I will tell you it was you can either get it on Tuesday's class in the story, or yesterday's class, because I talk about it. Yesterday's class, I read it. Or today's class. That's it. Yesterday's class, I read it. Or today's class, his quote from Lafayette, because I repeated it today, because it was, he called him, George Washington, the most superb man he had ever seen. And see what he did to be called that. George Washington, was not a government person. He was not a congressman. He was a soldier. That's who he was. And he set the example. And that's why we are here today. Whew! Good stuff. Why would you want to rewrite history? You know why? Because you haven't read a book. That's why. You're hanging on the Capitol and you didn't read a book. And, as long as I'm saying that, there's something that's really been grinding me lately. How there were no guns there. There were no guns there, but the one gun that went off, there were supposed to be any guns that were there, because that was illegal. Nobody's bringing up the fact that the one person who was shot and killed was a woman. In a sea of men. In a sea of men that had no guns. Even in the Capitol building, where were they? But one shot got out and it killed a woman. Whew, dead right there. Not even like sniper dead, right? Wow. 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 I'm not saying she was innocent, but she could have been. Maybe somebody knew that she was a spy. Who knows? Or maybe she had a bunch of bombs strapped on her and they knew that too. Who even knows? I don't know. I don't know. Why don't I know? I should know, right? If somebody's reporting the news like they're supposed to be, I should know. I don't know. Something happened there though. Woman, out of all that, did any alt-right person get killed except for Ashley? I don't know. Unbelievable. Unbelievable to me. Okay. Ash's line study. So let's take a look at that for a minute because there's a few facts here. Now, I'm speaking a little bit in terms of, there's the link there, so you can look it up, Ash's line study. I looked at, that's original film there, and I looked at one of the shortest ones. That was the one that I gave my students, that I used for my students, and I liked it a lot. It was short, it was to the point, it gave you everything that you needed to know about it, and it used original footage there. All right, so what did they vary to see? So what are they looking at? They're looking at conformity, right? Conformity. And I left that title up, like I said. This is something that I've used for my classes because I taught a course on group dynamics. And so I left that up there that says public versus, or private versus public acceptance, right? Private versus public acceptance. There are certain things. How is it that we are capable of some of the atrocious behaviors, being a sheeple? Let's just start with following somebody that we know is doing wrong, right? How does that happen? Well, of course, there's likely threatening situations, but some of the most threatening situations have to do with our public versus private personas, right? I wanted to pull this up here because I want to see it, what I'm talking about, right from the bigger slide as well. So I'm having such an issue with PowerPoint, like not letting me grab things, and it's just like I can't even tell you how it's frustrating me. How can't I don't even know. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares about my technology problems? I don't even care. I'm here. Okay. So we have got then public versus private persona. If I do something that I know is wrong, I can justify it inside. I might not even care. I don't care what you know, right? I don't care what you know. How is it that I didn't report that crime, right? When I should have reported that crime. I know all the facts. You don't. Judge me all day and all night that you want to, right? Somebody might say this in that situation. So I'm saying somebody follows the group or whatever and knowingly does something wrong. How can they live with themselves? Well, through this difference between public and private persona. In the public, I did this, right? Followed the group along, but in my heart, I know they're a bunch of wackos. We saw that with Fox News, right? How were they able to report lies every single day to the public? Because their private persona agreed with everybody else that it was okay. He was a wacko. My private persona said that the former president was a wacko, and as long as all of me and my peers knew that, I was okay with reporting lies. Now, do you see how that private persona can rationalize almost anything for you if you really wanted it to? For sure it could. It could rationalize, that private persona could rationalize anything for you, right? This is the reason why I say it's incumbent upon you then to move past that persona, that rationalization, to determine whether or not it's a moral choice. We can engage cognitively all day and all night, all the thoughts that we're supposed to engage, right? We could do that all day and all night, but those aren't moral choices, right? Those don't have to be moral choices at all. They can creep in, but I can make them creep right back out, right? Those moral decisions can creep in and I can make them creep right back out. How? By engaging my private persona, by rationalizing them right away. Yep, right? Of course. So why do I have to engage my morality? Because I can't get away from that. I can't rationalize my morality, right? I can't rationalize it. But you didn't do the right thing. I might have been in danger, but you didn't do the right thing. Yeah, but somebody else didn't do the right thing. But you lied about it. But somebody else lied about it. But you knew what was right, right? So that's why. And then think about the power of that, right? Think about the power of that. We're talking about mindful meditation here. I don't even remember. In one of the classes, or spiritual connection, I think it is, and about mindful meditation. And the difference there in being able to gain the entire benefit of mindful meditation is a full self-control of the mind for some period. Not every day, every moment, but what you're doing is you're training your mind that when it needs to, you are focused with everything that you have, right? That's the gain, the reward of real, true, mindful meditation. Mindful control. That's why it's mindful. It's mindful control of your mind. So think about the practical application of that mindful control. The practical, daily, regular application is really in moral choices. I just told you why it's not simply in thinking choices, right? It's not simply in thinking choices because I can privately rationalize something away, doing myself no favors, right? Right? The consequences of that are great, right? We've talked about health consequences, those kinds of things. All right. It's why we're made the way that we're made. We're made for those kinds of consequences. You benefit tremendously from thinking in moral ways. It's the only way that you get the depth of thought that you need, right? And in doing so, you are able to rationalize yourself, speaking in private public terms, into well-being. You don't have to use a private rationalization. You have made a moral choice. And that's what allows you to sleep well at night, not private rationalization. Right? I think I'll leave it there. I think I'll say the last thing I wanted to say. Hedonic versus eudaimonic. Is there meaning and purpose in what you're doing and what you're saying? Right? There's the moral choice then. Or are you pleased with the private, private acceptance? Are you pleased with private acceptance? Are you pleased with your private rationalization of who you are? Hedonic, I'm okay with it. I can move on. I can get pleasure, right? Or eudaimonic, I cannot get pleasure because it does not serve meaning and purpose in my life, right? Oh, how tangled, right? How rich. I was going to say tangled web, but that's got negative connotations. Okay, so then in this study, and we've talked about this before, they varied when we were talking about helping behavior, right? Same kind of thing here and same kind of results that we have. So they varied the number of Confederates. No, I can't say that it's the same kind of results. It was not. It kind of was. All right, Annette, just say it or don't say it. So they varied the number of individuals. And when they varied the number of individuals, what do you think happened? Well, what do you think happened? So what we're saying varied the number of individuals, that I had one other person agree with me. So the original experiment was set up so that none of the participants at first agreed with, none of the Confederates who are participating in the study, but whatever, None of the Confederates were to agree with the participant, okay? And the other thing about this is this. I'm pointing to the slide there. That's what I'm doing. The other thing about this is this, that it was very apparent which line was right. They did studies on if anyone got it wrong, right? When they were doing the line study for real, if anyone got it wrong, and no, 99%, and then, and then they had to throw out the other 1% for whatever, because there were some other issues with the other 1%, right? So yeah, basically everyone got these right. There was no discrepancy. It wasn't like, well, oh, it is kind of close. No, they knew that the participant knew it was the wrong line that he was saying or not saying, right? And there were plenty of trials where the participant would stick to his guns. I don't think there was any set of trials where at least one time the participant didn't stick to his guns, all right, and stick with it. It was just that the participant also very often, surprisingly often, was willing to go with the group, all right? And actually, the interesting thing about it is, we studied that. We studied, and that's really what the focus of this whole thing was. Why would anyone who rightfully knew the right answer, right? Why would anyone pick then the wrong answer? And actually, really, generally, it was about 1/4 to 33% of individuals each time would end up going along with the group. Okay. So you're still talking about the significant number of individuals or times, right? I think maybe one participant never went along with the group, but everybody else basically did. I'm not sure about that, but we basically got really at least one time that they succumbed to the group. So what would make anybody do that? But when you're talking about percentages here, to the point, when you're talking about percentages here, 25 to 33%, you still have 66 to 75% of the individuals that are not going along with the group. So that's a good chunk of people. But of course, that's not the people of interest. I'm not interested in those individuals who did the right thing. I'm interested in those individuals who followed the group, who were sheeples. And that really is generally what they study. Even a Milgram study, which I'll bring up here too. Even a Milgram study where they did the shocks, they had 66% of the people go all the way, but they didn't study the 33% of the people who didn't. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And you know what? I'm just going to say, Stanley Milgram, you know what? If you had a woman there that you thought was your peer, she would have said study the 33%. I'm just saying, there are some differences. I don't care what you think. There are some differences, and it just is just so predictable that you guys would have studied the worst. I don't even know. Image and likeness. I don't even know. So, in varying those numbers there, they varied the number, and we're going to stick right here. You can see that bar, so that's already giving you a great general idea. They varied the number of participants that agreed with the number of Confederates that would agree with the participants, okay? They varied the number of Confederates, helpers, that would agree with the participants. So, the very first bar there is 0. All right, so those are the very first stats. Nobody else, none of the Confederates went along with the participant. And they also, as they entered the room, which I didn't demonstrate in the video, as they entered the room, there was a purpose. It was very purposeful to make sure that the participant was in a particular spot at the table. So there were so many people in front of him, right, that would have disagreed or agreed already, right? So the first bar is nobody agreed with the participant. No Confederate agreed with the participant. The second column there, and what they're measuring is, I want to say, Percentage of participants showing each level of conformity. All right. So the percentage of participants that were conforming. Number of trials on which participant conformed. All right, you know what? Hold on just a minute. I want to make sure that I'm saying this right and making sure that these numbers, I don't think that DV is not right, because what ended up happening was that as soon as all right. I'm so sorry. Number of trials on which participants conformed. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. All right. Well, 1 to 3 trials. 1 to 3 trials in which participants conformed. And then the percentage of those that conformed. So here's the point that I want to make. And then I'll get back to that. I'm in front of the camera. I don't even know how many times I taught that doggone thing, and now I plopped it over here, and now I'm not even reading it correctly. I'm so sorry about that. Oh, I was on such a roll earlier, and now I just screwed it all up. So 1 to 3 trials on which participants conformed, and then the percentage of individuals in 1 to 3 trials that they conformed. That's what that is about, which isn't the point that I wanted to make, and that's the reason why I got screwed up. All right, so we can see the largest percentage in column number 2 conformed within 1 to 3 trials, right? So that if you generally conformed, you conformed in the 1 to 3 trials. That might be an interesting group for us to study, right? Who conformed right away? Now, if you look there, then the 4 to 6 trials over there, you can kind of theorize about this, right? Rationalize why would. There we see the most significant drop until the end there, right? The most significant drop in participants who conformed were in the group where they waited for trial 4 to 6, right? And in trials 4 to 6, we see almost the least number of conforming, right? Because I waited through the first 3 trials. I waited. And if I waited for the first 3 trials, I'm likely not going to go ahead in trials 4 to 6 and conform. I've already waited through the first. Significant number of people didn't wait. They conformed right away. But if I waited through the first 3 trials, I didn't conform. Now think about that. Well, gosh, they still are doing it to me. They're still doing it to me. Oh my gosh. And now I'm on trial 7 to 9 and they're still doing it. Maybe I am wrong. And so we see a little dash back up there, right? With the number of people who then begin to conform in trials 7 through 9. But then the last one is actually where we see the least conformity, just by a little bit, in trials 10 to 12. Why? I've already made it through 9 trials. Why am I going to conform now, right? The point I wanted to make was this, that if I had one person conform, which is what I thought that was, 1 to 3 people conforming, I very easily stuck to my guns. I had to read those labels, and but that is true, right? And then if I had more than 4, it didn't matter. I only needed one person to agree with me, and then the likelihood of me conforming really actually decreased, right? The likelihood of me conforming decreased. So, or the likelihood of me sticking to my guns increased, which is what I thought that was all about. So just rationalizing my confusion for my private and public audience. Okay. The making of sheeple continued. So here, I wanted to revisit Milgram's study. As I was going through my slides, I found this different way of taking a look at his study. So number one, this also had a picture of the shock machine, and so, or the shock generator is what they called it. And so you didn't have a picture of the shock generator before. I don't think that you saw a picture. I don't think I ever put one up there. So you can see each one of those dots there, that's actually a knob, and there's a light above it, and then there's a flip switch below it. So the top row is a light to make it look very official, and the bottom row is a switch. And then you can see below the switch labels there, or the switches, below the switches are labels. And that's where, if you look up close, you can see those labels that goes to mild, or nothing, basically, mild to severe. And then you end up with the XXX all the way over there to the right. But the point I wanted to take a look at here was why. So they are beginning to look at some of the reasons why individuals did conform. And you can see in the chart there, which is something that we had talked about. It was a variable that they changed, right? It was one of the factors that they varied. That's why we call it a variable. It was one of the factors that they varied there was the place where they were conducting the study. And so was it in a standard lab where we had 66% of individuals conforming? Was it in an office building location? So that doesn't look like you're doing research. Was it teacher places learner hand on shock plate, right? Which we talked about. So you had to touch the learner. And then you can see that these are in order of, shock severity. So the voltage, right? Going from the greatest voltage down to the least. So when I had to put the learner's hand on the shock plate, I was less likely to go all the way to the end of the shock generator, if you remember. The experimenter located remotely, so the experimenter wasn't there. That reduced the chance of my sticking out the experiment until the end, down to about 22%, something like that. 2 Confederates rebel. Now, this gives you an idea of what happens when I see somebody else actually rebel, right? Somebody else go against or disobey, right? Because there are studies on obedience or conformity. So individuals who don't conform, right? What is the power of that? The power of that is we had a significant decrease in conformity, right? Going all the way to the end of that shock generator and giving people shocks where it says XXX, right? Significantly decreased when you had 2 helpers, Confederates, right? Say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? So then who are these, psychos who are still continuing on? No, let me flip that switch. I don't care if they quit the study. I'm here. I'm not going to quit the study. Who are those psychos anyway, right? And that's what they predicted. Anyone who would go to the end of the study, scientists predicted, they asked them, right? They asked them, who would go, what's your prediction on how many people would go to the end of the study? And they said the most was 2%. And they said those people would be psychotic. And look at, even when I have people who are rebelling against the study, still have 10% who are like, yeah, give me that switch. Okay. Teachers choose shock levels. So teachers choose shock levels. So if I had the choice to choose the shock level, I wouldn't go all the way then. If I choose it, nobody's going all the way. I'm going to choose something that's far less. Okay, that makes sense. Excellent. So now we see, right, under some conditions, what are the conditions? Sometimes there are environmental conditions that contribute to, there are some other things I wanted to read there, that contributed to my going ahead with the study, right? With my conforming, which is what the study is on. Look at those. Why did people obey authority? So we can see from environment. There are environmental conditions that contribute to that. The pace of the study, when I don't have time to think. And again, we're demonstrating the beauty of conscious thought, getting to higher order thinking, metacognition, whatever you want to call it, the benefit in getting to think a little bit deeper about whatever's going on. If I have a fast-paced study, I can't do that, right? Small increments provide a justification for the next. And here's where we've got the public rationalization, right? We got public rationalization. Everybody else did it. That's a public rationalization, right? But also the other one, another one would be that, well, what's the big, he didn't, he wasn't, although he was screaming at sometimes, right? He was screaming and then quiet. Well, he can't be dead, right? He can't be dead because there's the researcher and he's not worried about it. All these rationalizations, right? Which totally makes sense. This is a contrived situation. The one guy there, Stanley Milgram, wrote a book on this because they wouldn't let him publish it in the regular journals scientific journals that he was supposed to publish them in. And so I have the book and I read the book and all of the idiosyncrasies of each one of these people because he details them, right? There are 40 men, so he details, the idiosyncrasies of this group. And one man was laughing the entire time. And I have original video of it and I've seen the original video and like a 90-minute video or whatever. And you get disturbed. It is so disturbing that he won't stop laughing. Every time that the researcher Confederate tells him to continue and go on, he goes to flip that switch and he is like almost like uncontrollably. He's not like bent over, but he can't stop laughing. He can't control his laughter and it becomes disturbing. Well, they say that they interviewed him. He knew. And I believe I would react that way, right? I would be like, seriously? Okay. Seriously? Really? Seriously? Okay. Right? So certainly these situations are very contrived, but, you've got people who are conforming on trial 1 to 3 for Ash's study, right? Goes to show you something different than Milgram's study, right? And also a conformity study that didn't require really that kind of mental stress on what I did, right? That was the whole thing, creating this mental stress. There's a lot of debate on how much mental stress, and most people who were in the study, I think they said not one person said that they didn't think it was valuable and that their stress wasn't worth, it wasn't okay for them to, or it was fine. It was okay. It ended up being okay. They weren't. But that Zimbardo study, not the same thing. Somebody had a mental breakdown. He didn't stop that study. Screw loose. Okay, so let's clarify a little bit what we're talking about, because there's lots of terms that you're probably familiar with, like sheeple, for example. I don't have to explain to you what I mean by sheeple, but there are probably other terms that are very familiar terms and also very valuable or somewhat familiar terms. You can understand them. They're not hard to understand, and some of them familiar, like group boundaries. But let's just talk a little bit about what we're talking about when we're using these terms, because it gives us a richer sense of our language then, and a richer understanding when we're using common language, right? Okay, so we have 7 minutes left. Is that right? No. We go till, yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. All right, so that picture is sort of depicting something I wanted to depict, which is in groups and out groups. All right. If I'm yellow and I'm in the in group, right? If I'm red, I'm depicting the out group. I'm the out group. Now I have likely other red people, right? Or whatever. Red little whatever. Doesn't even matter. I have other red people. But in this instance, red is the out group. All right, so there, and these groups are real groups, right? And they can have guidelines and written whatever boundaries for that group, right? And they're group boundaries. They have written boundaries. You can be in this association if you live in this, vicinity, but you can't be in this association if you don't. So as far as this association is concerned, if you don't live within this vicinity, you are the out group, right? So we can define out groups literally right on paper. We can define an out group, but also we can have in groups and out groups that are psychological. We're going to have physical in groups and out groups, right? So you're part of my group if you match my ethnicity. You're not part of my group if you don't. And the more you match my ethnicity, the more you are part of my in group. And the more I match yours, the more we are part of the same group. But not all groups, just that group, right? Out of my relatives, there's only one set of cousins that have the exact same makeup, ethnicity that I do. So we share ethnicity with cousins, right? Different, but not exactly the same percentage. Only one set of cousins that I have, first cousins, share exactly my makeup. They're more my in group. If I were talking simply about my ethnicity, they are more my in group than my other cousins, right? Doesn't mean I'm closer to them. That's another in group, right? I can have this group of cousins that I'm closer to. This group, I have an in group based on ethnicity. This group, I have an in group based on I like them more, friendliness, right? This group of cousins, I'm close to their age, right? Those are the ones that are in my same age group, but those can be in various families. I'm in their in group as far as age goes, but not in their in group as far as ethnicity or even family or anything like that, right? Or other things like that. All right. So those are very practical examples that I just gave you, but then we have psychological examples, right? Like, I don't fit into the alt-right group. They're like, no, you don't. Yay. And I'm like, no, I don't. Right? Yeah. Anyway, so that's a psychological group. But there are groups that you likely want to be a part of, just like me, right? So, for example, when I was going to school, I wanted to be part of the psychological institution, the institution of psychology, right? So I wanted to be part of, my goal wasn't to be part of a university, but that I was part of a university. And that's another point. My goal wasn't to be part of a university. My goal was to teach psychology at a university. Well, so I guess I was to that extent, right? But going to school, I was never really university material. I really wasn't. I never ever did dorm life, party life, none of it. I went later. I was non-traditional student, right? So psychologically speaking, I'm sitting there in the university classroom, but psychologically speaking, I was not feeling like I fit in. I was okay with that. You could feel psychologically like that you don't fit in, like you not fit in. You could feel like you don't fit in psychologically and still be okay with that. It doesn't have to be damaging because you don't fit in psychologically. We can have confidence about who we are. I can be just fine with not fitting in with the group, right? Psychologically speaking, or with their rules or whatever it is, right? But we want to think about these concepts of groups, the concepts that we have of groups. We want to really vary our concepts so that we can better understand how we get to group think, of course, right? So, when you think about your group, when you think about any group, it's not bad now to begin to think about all of the recipe ingredients, right? The recipe that makes you part of that group. And then to what extent are you part of that group? Are you all in, right? Are you on the fringes of that group? all of those things are going to affect when you're a sheeple, right? And, you know, being unsheepled, whatever, doesn't mean that we're supposed to be bucking every system either. And that's, and now I'm unsheepled because all you are is, you know, tyranny on wheels. And that's a sheeple as well, as we saw on January 6th, right? As we saw on January 6th. Okay, folks, that's what I have for you right now. So we got through 2 slides and I didn't even get through that one. So I'm going to leave you with the next thought just so that we come back here on Wednesday, likely not on Tuesday. All right. Roles, norms, and interpersonal. Hold on, let me read it. My face in there. Okay. Interpersonal. I thought so. All right. So, we want to talk about group boundaries. So we're going to come back and talk about group boundaries, and that has to do with our roles, right? What do you think of your roles? What do you think of the norms of that group? So what do I have to do to be, what behaviors do I have to engage in to be part of that group, right? And then what are my relationships like within that group? Because all of those things contribute to how much I'm all into that group. Okay? All right, this is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am the teacher, and this is the classroom. I will see you back here. I might be here Tuesday afternoon. I'm not sure. I will let you know because you will see it posted live. So you'll see that I'll be going live. All right, thanks. Thanks for joining me. Have a great weekend.